Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. And the Steelers are back at practice. OTAs are underway, at least the voluntary portion of them. The Steelers will have 6 of these sessions, 3 this week, 3 next week. And then they will have their mandatory minicamp, which is another 3 days starting on June 10th. So the entire offseason program leading up to training camp will only be 9 days instead of what is typically 13 days. That's because the Steelers chose to shorten that. Basically, I guess because the NFLPA is kind of wanting to shift things around in terms of the offseason program, or at least this is the theory, and teams just want to get ahead of it. Maybe potentially it could be because of the injury stuff that the Steelers have. Whatever it is, the Steelers only have 6 sessions, and Aaron Rodgers is not there. We'll talk about some of the other players that didn't show up today. We'll talk about recent Aaron Rodgers podcast appearance where he might have tipped his hand a little bit in terms of what he plans on doing, and then some reports about Kirk Cousins and the potential for the Steelers to use him as a backup plan. Those will be our topics for today. I'm joined by my co-host above me here on the screen, Joe Clark. My name is Ross McCorkle. Joe, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Spent a nice weekend in New Jersey for a family event. So back home now in Boston, just getting back settled in today. Everything's going well.
Very good. Well, we'll just dive into OTAs then, and the people who didn't show up somehow made more news than the people who did show up. And so we'll talk about that first. Of course, Aaron Rodgers hasn't signed with the team, and so it's no big surprise that he didn't show up. But we will talk about Rodgers in the next segment. The players that are under contract that did not show up to at least this first day of voluntary OTAs are TJ Watt, DK Metcalf, and Darius Slay. I think Watt, I guess there was a question about whether he was going to show up. In my mind, that was a sealed deal. I mean, this guy's waiting on a $40 million contract. There's absolutely no reason for him to be at voluntary OTAs. We saw it last year, even with Cam Hayward, with much smaller amounts of money on the line. And Hayward, at least sat out the first few sessions before showing up. What was it, for the second week of OTAs? I think he ended up showing up. He kind of said that his leadership role with the team was too important to him to kind of sit out for that whole OTA session. So, Joe, were you surprised by TJ Watt not being there? Was this like a big news to you?
No, I wasn't surprised at all, especially after Hayward did it last year. I mean, him and both Watt and Hayward have enough built up with the Steelers in terms of what they've done for the organization that them not showing up really wouldn't be a big deal even if there was no contract dispute. And with Watt, obviously looking for a contract that would put him among the top edge rushers in football, one of the highest paid players in football. It just, like you said, it just doesn't make any sense for him to show up. I mean, I don't even necessarily see it um, as him, trying to show something to the organization by not showing up. And maybe it's part of that, but there's no use in him risking injury or anything by being there for OTAs. It's football in shorts. He's been in this defense. He's been in this team for a while. So I don't really view it as a big deal at all. And I was not surprised.
Yeah, TJ Watt likely to get probably at or slightly above that 40 million mark that Myles Garrett got with the Browns. The Browns just keep doing the whole league dirty with their contracts because the Deshaun Watson thing kind of changed the quarterback market in an interesting way, and now they had to overpay what I would probably call a slight overpay for Myles Garrett. I mean, they upped the ante from, what was it, like 35 for Max Crosby, or I can't remember now. This happened a couple of months ago now, but Max Crosby got a certain amount, and the Browns were like, "Oh, we'll just go ahead and up it." But it's like bidding at an auction and just upping it by $5 million for no reason. I guess that's what the price you have to pay to be the Browns and to actually have talent stick around, because nobody wants to be there, of course. Even Myles Garrett kind of made that clear, saying that he didn't want to be there just because he wanted a chance to compete. And so money ended up talking. And of course, the Steelers are now in an interesting position because of that. TJ Watt, do you think he'll end up getting the 40 plus 41-ish million? And do you think he's going to get that done before guys like, I don't know, Aiden Hutchinson, there's Trey Hendrickson, there's Micah Parsons? Do you think, well, hopefully the Steelers don't continue waiting, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't, it's malpractice by the Steelers. I think waiting for Crosby and Garrett was a mistake to begin with. They could have gotten Watt done early, but they keep waiting and they keep waiting. And if they keep waiting more for the Hutchinsons and the Parsons to get their contract, it's only gonna be worse for the Steelers. They're gonna have to pay Watt more. If they do wait, I think he's a surefire lock to get over 40 million. I do still think he will, just because they have to get it done at some point. And if he doesn't get it done before the season, then I think we actually have to have serious questions about what's going to happen in the future. But I do think they'll get it done probably at some point in the next month or so. I'd be surprised if this dragged into training camp,
Hmm.
and I would think he probably gets right around 40 million.
I'm trying to remember exactly when Hayward's got done last year. Do you remember?
I think it had to be like late June, I want to say. I think his was done before camp. Alex Highsmith's was, I think, a week into training camp, or like maybe even right before. So, I mean, the precedent from the last two contracts they did, I think, would make it so that they kind of get it done at least earlier than late July. And if it does drag into late July, I think it's going to be worse financially for the Steelers and better financially for Watt, which begs the question: is Watt waiting to see what these other guys get before he signs? But I think after the Garrett and Crosby, I think paying him 40 million plus would be more than enough, and I think he would do it. So I would hope that it gets done now within the next, I guess, less than a month now.
If you get beat to the punch and you're the Steelers, you get beat to the punch by one, two, or maybe even all three of those guys. I mean, is there a limit to what the Steelers would pay him? Say it gets to like 44, 45. I mean, we're talking about. Is there a point at which the Steelers are like, oh my goodness, what do we do here? Like, is there a spot where they won't pay him in your
I
mind?
mean, I think there has to be a limit if Hutchinson and Parsons get signed to, like you said, 44 or 45, because they're a lot younger. They have their best football, still ahead of them. Watt's going to be years 30 this year. Coming off a year he was banged up, wasn't as productive in the second half. So for him to reset the market after those guys get paid, I think would have to be at a point where the Steelers, it's like, all right, we're not going to give you, that much money there. So I do think there is probably a plan. I'm not exactly sure what that monetary amount would be, but I do think if he still wants more than those two after they get paid, then the Steelers kind of have to put their foot down.
Yeah, it's an interesting predicament to be in. And I mean, we saw Hayward perform well at 36. Watt's much younger than that. And yeah, he had a down year, but I think teams were chipping him at just a completely absurd rate. The Steelers seemed committed to fixing that to a certain degree by moving TJ Watt around a little bit more. TJ Watt himself said that at the end of last season after dealing with some of those frustrations. And, if he's kind of fully healthy and moving around a little bit more, and he has somebody like Derek Harmon freeing him up as a defensive lineman, I think that, we could see Watt get back to that defensive player of the year type level of play. I'm not really too worried about that, but it is an interesting dilemma for a team that is kind of in transition. And are you really going to compete? I mean, the Steelers always view themselves as competing, so I guess you just throw this part of the conversation out but from the fans' perspective, from just like thinking about it logically and detached and not a part of the team, I mean, is this the best time to be paying somebody like that? I know a lot of fans are thinking that. It's more, I guess, rhetorical there. But Watt didn't show up, but the two other guys were maybe a little more surprising. DK Metcalf and Darius Slay. I think Watt, you don't worry about that at all because he's been around. There's nothing that he's going to learn or benefit from OTAs. Maybe he could help some of the other guys benefit, like maybe a Jack Sawyer, for example. But Watt himself, you're not worried about OTAs really affecting him at all. But Metcalf and Slay, two guys who could probably stand to benefit at least a little bit. They're veterans and they've been around. It's not like this is make or break for them at all. But, I mean, start to build chemistry with their players. I mean, Darius Slay talked about wanting to mentor Joey Porter Jr., and so this is just one more opportunity for them not to be there. Joe, your reaction to one, well, I guess both of them, whichever one you want to start with, missing OTAs, the first day of OTAs.
Yeah, I was surprised with both of them. I mean, it's not like with them. I mean, yeah, they're older, especially Slay. Don't want to get hurt, but they got their money, so there's not really any risk there. Especially Metcalf, who signed the 5-year extension. I would think they'd want to show up and start building chemistry and just be in the building. I mean, Patrick Queen said today, he was asked flat out while he was there, and he said, like, I just feel my role as a leader on the defense, the same thing that Hayward said last year, and being able to work with my guys and lead my guys. You'd think somebody like Slay, who wants to come in and be a veteran mentor and a leader in the secondary, would at least show up and be there. And again, it's voluntary. Who knows if they had something going on or what the deal was. So, like, I don't want to be too harsh on them at all. And with 6 sessions, maybe they'll show up for, at least one of them or two of them or whatever. But I was definitely surprised that neither of them were there. Um, I mean, with Metcalf, you can make the argument, well, he already worked out with Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers gets in the building, maybe he goes. And what's the point if it's going to be Mason Rudolph if they think they're going to sign Rodgers? But you don't know you're going to sign Rodgers until he actually puts pen to paper. So it'd be nice for him to show up and, build chemistry with Mason Rudolph. But Rudolph did say that he's been around the facility, he's been around the team, he's gotten to work with them a little bit, gotten to know him. He had nothing but good things to say about DK Metcalf. So, I mean, not really a concern, but it was definitely surprising that neither showed up.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said there. I think Metcalf is the one that kind of bugs me a little bit more just because he has that 5-year deal and, they're kind of looking to him to be kind of the leader in that room and for the offense. I mean, Pat Freiermuth and Mason Rudolph are the only players on the offensive side of the ball that were drafted by the Steelers and have been around for more than one contract. Rudolph, of course, had a gap year with the Titans last year, but the offense lacks kind of experience, maturity, leadership in a big way. And so somebody like Metcalf, you're kind of counting on to be that. And, maybe he'll show up tomorrow. Maybe he had some, I think he just got engaged. Maybe he had a wedding, some kind of, who knows, maybe he had something off the field that he had to take care of. So you can't get too mad at that. And we'll just see how this thing plays out. I would guess that Metcalf will show up at least for week 2 of this thing. I don't know about Slay. He's up there in age, and I guess he I don't really know what the deal is with Slay there. But Mason Rudolph was asked about, well, a lot of people were asked about Aaron Rodgers. It was one of the most popular questions of the day. Mason Rudolph, I think, kind of gave the similar answer as he did on, what podcast was he on? Caboli and Mac, saying, he's just going to be the best version of himself, essentially. He said, it's nothing new to me. There's been constant noise. That's the nature of the NFL, so I've been used to that for a long time. Do nothing but be the best I can be and help our team get better this spring. And so, kind of a non-answer. He did say he hasn't talked to Rodgers. That's basically what he also said on the Caboli and Mac podcast. And he talked a little bit more about fitting in with Arthur Smith's offensive system. And so, you have guys like Roman Wilson, kind of, what did he call him? Elite? I think he called Mason Rudolph elite. Is this the Joe Flacco type of elite, or what kind of elite are we talking about here? But I think it was like last year that Roman Wilson stepped in as the rookie and just called Calvin Austin third, the leader on, like making this big declaration of Calvin Austin's kind of the leader. And now he's calling Mason Rudolph elite. So you can always count on Roman Wilson for a good soundbite or two. It seems like Roman Wilson's acclimating well. What did he say today? He said some things about wanting to hit the ground running and such.
Yeah, so Roman Wilson said, quote was, I don't want to think too much about last year, but I definitely learned a lot, and it definitely helped to shape who I am this upcoming season. Taking care of my body to an elite level, I've been more locked in. I feel like myself, and I'm ready to come out here and practice hard. And he looked good. There's a clip of him running routes. No surprise, he was healthy at the end of the season last year, so should obviously be fully healthy this year. He said he's taking care of his body more. Which, he had the hamstring was a soft tissue injury last year, so hopefully, can avoid that. And he was certainly not the only one who suffered a soft tissue injury for the Steelers last year. Um, you know, he only played 5 snaps last year, so it's understandable. He wants to forget about last season and not really, harp too much on what was really a lost season for him, but can help him grow as a person, help him recognize where he needs to be better, and, hopefully he gets some big things out of him this year, or at least, a jump in production to make him, a 35, 45, 50 catch guy.
Yeah, and he's got Calvin Austin III next to him, who also had a lost rookie season, kind of help him through some of the challenges of adjusting to a bigger role and whatnot. I think Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III will be competing, but they'll also be kind of making each other better. I don't know how much they're going to kind of fill the same role, and it seems like Calvin Austin's maybe has the pole position, if you will, in that role just because of his little mini breakout season last year. But I think a lot of people are kind of assuming that Roman Wilson is only a slot player. I've seen that in the comment sections of our articles, and some kind of pushback on me saying that I think he could be more than that. Joe, do you think that he could be more than slot? Do you think that there's potential for him to play on the outside?
I definitely think there is. I mean, for Roman Wilson, it's something he did in college at Michigan, so I wouldn't be surprised if he worked on the outside a little more than we anticipated. I don't necessarily think you can completely pigeonhole him into that slot role, especially because um, I don't really know who you have as that number two right now. I mean, Robert Woods is probably your number two on the outside. I mean, the team could look to add somebody else, but I think it wouldn't be surprising to see him work a little bit more on the outside.
Yeah, I agree. I think Roman Wilson is the probably best candidate to fill that role right now in my mind. I mean, Calvin Austin III, you don't want him on the outside. I think you can for limited snaps. Robert Woods a little bit. I mean, who else even is there?
Ben Skoranek, Scotty
Yeah.
Miller, like
Yeah.
no Montana Lamonius Craig. You're not looking at any really elite options out there.
Yeah. Oh, that was an all-time good name signing this morning for that Arizona receiver. Makes you think of the Hingle McCringleberries of the world. Um, Anyway, we'll move on to Aaron Rodgers and his podcast appearance. He kind of tipped his hand a little bit in terms of what he wants to do for this upcoming season. Joe, before we hop into this, I need you to explain to me the concept behind what is a Mike Stud, and also who shows up to a concert and then all of a sudden there's a question and answer session with a NFL player. Like, if I showed up to a rap concert or whatever kind of music you want to label this guy, and some random question and answer session just broke out, like, what is this? Are you seem to be slightly more aware of who this guy was?
He had one, maybe two songs that were good when I was in like early in high school. I think he has a song like "Win" or something like that, and he had a song with Marcus Stroman, who's a Major League Baseball pitcher, because they went to Duke together and played baseball at Duke together. And he grew up in Rhode Island, so like kind of nearby. So he was at least on my radar. Like I listened to, I don't know, one or two of his songs. Um, in high school. I mean, they weren't good. I haven't listened to them in probably 10 years. Um, but I knew of his existence basically just because, oh, he was the rapper who played baseball with Marcus Stroman. But apparently him and Rodgers are good friends. So Rodgers was on tour with him. I think this was in Austin, Texas. I don't even know exactly where, but yeah. Real ridiculous scene with just a podcast with fans yelling out questions to him. And apparently Rodgers is going to keep following him around tour, so this might not be the first time we have to deal with this. But I don't think he's a very good rapper. I don't really know if he even still classifies himself as a rapper or what. Uh, but yeah, that is just wild that he's back in our lives, back in my life, in a somewhat meaningful way, because you have to listen to this podcast that Rodgers is apparently divulging more about football than he has in the last, 3-4 months.
Yeah, all it took was I don't know, roughly teenage, preteen girl to ask him whether or not he was going to play for the Bears, and all of a sudden he starts somewhat spilling the beans in terms of his plans. He said, no, I'm not going to play for the Bears, but I know a team, this is paraphrasing, but I know a team who is going to be in Chicago this upcoming season. Of course, the Steelers will be on the road in Chicago this year. I suppose I've seen, I guess, like Mike Florio or some of these people who really think he's going to the Vikings also said, oh, well, the Vikings play in Chicago as well. But no, it seems very, just based on all the other context clues, he was definitely talking about the Steelers. Now, of course, he hasn't signed with the Steelers still, and voluntary OTAs began. I guess the next deadline would be June 10th, which is mandatory minicamp. I guess it wouldn't be impossible for him to sign at the end of this week and show up for week 2 of voluntary stuff. There's nothing preventing that from happening, but at this point, most likely, June 10th, June 9th, I guess, if you want to have him signed the day before. Adam Schefter today said that the Steelers will be willing to wait up until September 7th or whatever their week 1 game is, basically saying they'll wait until the last possible second. I mean, that just makes me want to. I can't really say what that makes me feel on this podcast, but it wouldn't be great in Steelers news world if this drags on for another, what would that be, 3.5 months now until Aaron Rodgers signs? Do you think that there's any chance of that being the case? And I guess this kind of does segue us into topic 3 with Kirk Cousins, but I mean, would the Steelers wait all the way until September?
I mean, I would be pretty shocked if they waited that long because, I mean, Rodgers isn't going to sign and sit behind anybody. If you're signing him and throwing him, I mean, you basically would just be throwing him in the fire week 1 with limited or no time working with really any receiver outside of DK Metcalf, outside of that one throwing session we know about. No time working with any of his other receivers. And, who knows? I mean, everybody speculated if he has a handshake agreement, that he knows the playbook, but I mean, we don't know that for sure, so we wouldn't know the playbook. I mean, I would be stunned if they waited that long. I mean, even back the owners' meetings, Mike Tomlin kind of said training camp was the demarcation point. He walked that back a little bit, but you would think that you take him at his word from his first initial time that he says it. I would think that they're not going to wait beyond training camp, or at least into training camp. Fine, if they want to wait a week into camp, then like that wouldn't surprise me. But waiting into September would just be shocking to me, and I think would be just kind of stupid to begin with there, unless he's really content sitting behind Mason Rudolph for 3 games before he gets up to speed. So I would definitely be surprised if that was the case.
Let's hope not. And this transitions us into topic 3 about Kirk Cousins and the timing of some of these reports. First of all, let me go over the reports. Jeremy Fowler on ESPN, SportsCenter, I think 2 different SportsCenter hits, one on Saturday or Sunday and then one on Monday, talking about the Steelers have Kirk Cousins on their radar at the very least, and talking about kind of what a trade might look like for Cousins. I think he specifically said it would be a hefty price tag, meaning the Falcons aren't willing to trade him for pennies on the dollar. And I think that they've already shown that this year with their actions, because they did pick up his $10 million option, or sorry, roster bonus, not option. They picked up a $10 million, cash hit to the face. They're not going to just be willing to trade him for pennies on the dollar. They've made it quite clear that they're content with rolling into the season with a very expensive backup, and maybe somebody gets hurt early in the season and he becomes a valuable trade chip then. And so, Joe, Kirk Cousins, what, do you think that is a possibility at all? First of all, and would you rather just stick with like a Mason Rudolph if Rodgers falls through?
I mean, if somebody like Jeremy Fowler is putting it out there, I think it has to at least be a little bit of a possibility. He's not going to, recklessly speculate that when he says the Steelers have at least maintained their interest on him. Although James Palmer from Underdog has kind of said that, the Steelers don't have any interest in him. But so I think it has to at least be considered as a possibility. So I won't rule it out. As far as do I want Kirk Cousins? I mean, absolutely not. At that point, I'd rather roll with Mason Rudolph. I think Cousins, I mean, he had a few good games to begin the year last year. He had the 509-yard overtime win against the Buccaneers, but he was a statue in the pocket, completely deteriorated down the second half of the season, which is why I got benched for Michael Penix and why he's even available right now. I don't really think he raises your ceiling any more than they're going to have with Rudolph, which is kind of crazy to say, I guess, given that, Cousins has been a really good quarterback in this league in the past, but he's older and he's not mobile anymore. I mean, the Steelers week 1 last year beat him with, 6 field goals or whatever it was, 5 field goals. Just because he couldn't move and the Steelers feasted on the pass rush against him. And in the AFC North, I just don't think that's going to work at all. So I am not really a proponent of trading for Cousins. I think if something happens with Rodgers and that falls through, you just cut your losses and you roll with Mason Rudolph and see what he can get you. Because I think you can still win 8 or 9 games with Mason Rudolph. I don't think you're winning more than 8 or 9 games with Kirk Cousins out there either. So I wouldn't really be a proponent of giving up anything to acquire him, and then also having to have his salary, whatever it would be, because it would have to be pared down at some point. But if the Falcons don't want to pay off much, it's still going to be a pretty hefty salary. I don't think you want to deal with that in your books for not only this year, but in the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, Fowler said that they haven't been willing to budge much on the money part of it, and I guess the feeling around the league is that if they were willing to budge, that he'd probably not be on the Falcons roster, and somebody would have grabbed him by now. And so, yeah, I mean, he has what, 37 and I think it's 37.5 million in guarantees that of salary to figure out and how to split who's paying what. The Steelers could obviously pay for it. They actually have quite a bit of cash and cap space at this moment, even with the projected TJ Watt deal. They have plenty of space. I mean, we were at one point talking about Aaron Rodgers getting 30, 40, whatever obscene amount of money, $1 million to play for the Steelers for 1 year, and it seems like he was willing to play for $10 million, but the possibility existed that the Steelers could have signed Aaron Rodgers for that amount, and so they can obviously fit somebody like Kirk Cousins in if they really wanted to, and so I think the plausibility is fine. I think there's for one, he didn't show up to the Falcons OTAs today, right?
He did not.
And there's some kind of incentive for the Falcons to hang on to him until at least June 1st, because it would function the same way as a post-June 1st cut, which spreads the dead money out between this year and the following year instead of getting hit with all of that at once, I believe. Is that the mechanism? Am I saying that right?
Yes. Yeah, they would be able, I think it would only put 12 million on their books for this year and allow them to put more, or it's either they only keep 12 million or they push 12 million off to 2026. But whatever the mechanism is, they can push the dead money into next year. They only have, I think they have less than 6 million in cap space for this year. And they don't have like any clear restructure candidates, so it behooves them to have as little dead money as possible for this year.
Right. So, I mean, Cousins, I think there is one, I guess, the optimist way of thinking about things. Well, what have we been talking about with Aaron Rodgers and his 5 wins from last year? Oh, he's another year removed from his Achilles. Those Achilles injuries are tough to come back from the next year. I mean, Rodgers happened week 1 of 2023. Kirk Cousins happened, towards the end of the year almost, I think, right?
Yeah, I think it was like week 12 or something.
Yeah, so we're talking about, a few months even beyond when Rodgers was, and so it's reasonable to think that maybe Cousins could potentially have a little bounce back year, and so maybe the Steelers would be kind of making that same bet that they are on Rodgers. Now, Rodgers is obviously a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. His career has been better than Kirk Cousins. Cousins, who only has 1 playoff win, isn't exactly the quarterback that you want to bring in to get over the playoff, not having a playoff win for however many years. So I think there's a lot of reasons to not want Cousins, but I could potentially see the argument for bringing him in. And, the Steelers obviously always want to compete in the now. What they think about Mason Rudolph, I mean, they've been expressing confidence, but he's never entered a season as a starter. He only has, probably like 1 season worth of starts in his career at this point, maybe a slightly less. I don't know exactly the number there, but it's a little less than a season's worth of experience, and the Steelers obviously value experience. So Cousins, I personally would rather them just stick with Rudolph. Are you on the same page there?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think we'll wrap up that topic there. Hopefully we don't have to talk about that more, but the timing of those reports was at least slightly intriguing to me. If those reports are happening right now, does that mean that the Steelers are currently poking around? And if they're currently poking around, does that mean they're less confident than they appeared to be about Rodgers? I mean, maybe I'm just reading too much into things there, but that was my I was a little bit puzzled by the timing of those Kirk Cousins reports that were coming out. But we'll move into our listener question here. We got one from Brett from San Angelo, Texas. If you want to have your question answered on a future episode, 412-254-3145. Again, 412-254-3145. If I spoke too fast, that's in the show notes. And we would love to have you either leave a voicemail or text the line for a chance to have your question answered on a future episode. Here is Brett.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo, and I want to make a comment and question about the seeming discrepancy between the quote-unquote in or out plan for this year. First point I want to make is that I think that, people, media, everybody makes way too much about what Tomlin and Khan and Rooney say. They are going to say in any interview whatever furthers their agenda. And sometimes that agenda is selling tickets. But they're going to say whatever furthers their agenda. If it happens to be true, so be it. But they're saying it doesn't make it any more or less likely to be true, period. Now, do you agree with, I guess my next question is, to me, their off-season moves all make sense if you divorce yourself from those comments and you realize that in the last 5 games, this team may finally have realized they don't have a Super Bowl caliber defense. If you go from there, it looks like all of their picks are made based on the future. They wanted a receiver long term. They knew Pickens wasn't it, so they went out and traded for a guy they did extend, and then trade Pickens to recoup capital. The quarterbacks, they let them walk to get the compensatory draft picks because none of them were the guy. Going after Rodgers because he won't affect the compensatory pick. If they sign him, great. If we don't, no big deal. He's not really the guy either. And all the rest of the moves have been made to build that defense long term, 5 out of 7 picks. So if you divorce yourself from their comments, here's my question. If you divorce yourself from their comments and you take that into consideration, they don't really think their defense can compete and that they need to rebuild on both sides of the ball. So their moves make sense. Really appreciate your answer. You guys are doing a great job and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
All right, Brett, thank you for the question. More or less calling out the Steelers a little bit for saying that they are always looking to compete, though their moves this offseason may or may not be in line with that philosophy on always wanting to compete in the here and now. I mean, we've heard Tomlin say before that he owes his current guys work too hard for him to have his attention on anything other than the current team and kind of planning for the future. I mean, to a certain extent, it's always a guy like Omar Khan's job to plan for the future. You look at the compensatory picks and their strategy in free agency this year. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, Brett, is fair to an extent, where the Steelers are probably planning more for the future than they have in any time I can remember. And of course, that's probably partially because of they had Ben Roethlisberger for so long. You're not going to plan for the future when you have a franchise quarterback. And so, this is an unfamiliar territory for Steelers fans. Joe, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I don't think they're admitting defeat, by what they've done this offseason, but I do think they've made a concerted effort to kind of pick up, the 2026 comp picks and recognize that that's the year they can probably get their quarterback of the future. They're still doing what they can to compete now. I mean, they signed Darius Slay. They're still going after Rodgers, 2 veterans there. So they're making an effort to compete. But I do think, as you said, that more than they have in recent history, made kind of a concerted effort to build for the future. So they're doing a little bit of both. It's not half in, half out. They're doing whatever they can to compete and win this year while kind of investing more for the future. So I believe them when they say they think they can win this year. They're not, the top of the AFC. I think it's going to be more of a struggle, but they're trying, but also kind of emphasizing the future where they can kind of reload and build a team that will be capable of potentially being a Super Bowl contender come 2028, 2029. So yeah, I mean, agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and Brett, I mean, I guess it's fair to be skeptical, and the money is, I mean, it is a business. Players say it all the time when they talk about contract stuff. It is a business, and so they obviously want to sell tickets and get butts in seats. But I mean, especially to a guy like Tomlin. I mean, I don't really think he cares too much about that side of things. I mean, obviously Rooney and the ownership group have an interest in that. Khan, I mean, you could argue that these guys, their jobs depend on making the moves that make the owner happy, sure, but I've never really got the sense that it's comes down to that in terms of their day-to-day decision making. You could make the argument that trading George Pickens does not get butts and seats. That was one of their most exciting players for the last several years here, and they got rid of him. So, I get what you're saying to an extent, Brett. I think hopefully this is just a short kind of transition period here, or a reload as they would call it, or as they have called it in the past. And hopefully they find that quarterback, whether it's Will Howard, whether it's whoever they draft in the first round next year, and then you're right back at it where you don't really think about the future, and you always think about maximizing the current window. So I think we all want to get back to that place, but who knows? It could be a year, it could be 5 years, it could be 10, it could be longer than that. A lot of teams have been stuck in this cycle for decades and decades. So we can only hope that is not the case. Joe, anything else to add?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well.
All right, well, that is it for today's show. One more time, 412-254-3145. Call us, tell us your name, where you're from, leave us a question, maybe a question about OTAs or something about the current Steelers. We would love to answer pretty much any question that you have. We just ask that you keep it brief and digestible for us so we don't get too confused, but otherwise, that is it for today's show. I am Ross, that is Joe, and we will catch you guys next time.